Hi, everyone. This is Ellen from Ellin Lolis Consulting and my admit coach. And I'm super excited today to be talking to you about how to use MBA, how to use AI in your MBA essays. We're not going to be talking about if you should use it or why you shouldn't use it because we know you're going to use it, right? So instead, we're going to talk about what can the admissions committee tell when they're looking at your essay, and is that a problem? We're going to talk about the deadly sins, so to speak, of using AI in your essays. We're going to talk about some of the tells of AI in essays and how you can kind of remove those to help your essays read a little bit better. And then we're also going to be talking about some strategies to help you use AI to write even better essays than you can use yourself. So I'm really excited to have you guys on board today. Throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, please leave them in the chat. I'd also love for you guys to let me know where you're joining us from. It's always exciting to see such a global audience, see people joining us from around the world. So please let me know where you guys are joining us from. I kind of bounce around. So also always looking for good places to travel. So let us know that. So thinking a little bit, I want to just introduce you guys to me really briefly. So I am a professional MBA admissions consultant with 10 plus years of experience and a 98.9% success rate. I like to share that because there are a lot of great coaches out there, and there are a lot of people who maybe have applied to business school out there. And so I think it's important where information comes from. And when we talk about a 98.9% success rate, I think it's important to clarify how we get that. We look at how many of our clients apply versus how many are admitted to at least one of their target schools. And the average person applies to about 3 schools with us. So usually most years everyone passes. Every once in a while, there's a little mismatch between GMAT and school choice. So that's a little bit about me. To give you guys an overview of our agenda today, we're going to talk about what the AdComs can detect, the 3 deadly sins of AI essay writing, and the right way to use AI in your essays. So excited to have you guys all joining in, and please don't forget to share your questions in the chat as things go along. So I want to start off this presentation by setting the tone. The question is not whether or not you're going to use AI. The question is if you're using it as an amateur or a strategist, because we know you're using AI, and probably you should be, right? I recently read a book by Ethan Mollick. He's an AI expert and professor at Wharton Business School, and he actually tested this out in his classroom. He gave his class an assignment and said, okay, I want you guys to write an essay. Don't use AI, don't use any other tools, just do it yourselves. And they delivered essays that were decent, what he usually expects. And then he said, now you can use AI, but you need to use it as a co-creator. And we're going to talk about this term a lot, co-creator. So that's definitely an important keyword to kind of watch for throughout the presentation. But he said, I want you guys to use AI as a co-creator. Help it help you. And so what they did is they then used, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever AI they preferred, and sent in a new essay. And he said that they were tremendously better. And he said, I think they might have even been better than what they could have done on their own, even in the optimal circumstances. I think AI helped them reach new levels of skill that I don't think that they could have reached on their own. So really the question about AI is, if we're using it well, it can help us do even better than we can do on our own. If we're not, it's going to sink our applications before they even get very far. So we need to be thinking about, how am I using AI as a strategist? That's our number one point today. I am not anti-AI at all. So if you are, we can debate in the comments, but this is going to be kind of a pro-AI view of how to use it in admissions. So one thing that I think is really important, and last week we were doing a presentation on essays in general, especially leadership essays. And somebody asked, what can the admissions committee tell, and how does that impact my application? And I think that's a really important question. So I think there's this dirty secret that we kind of all know, but that detection software is unreliable, and the schools know it, right? I did a test of this with my team last year. I have members of my team who are professional writers. They have MFAs in writing. And I said, write an essay from scratch. And these are people that aren't trained in AI. They're writers, so they love to write. And then I AI generated an essay. And, surprisingly, the essay from the professional writer that was beautiful with all of these metaphors showed up as a higher AI score than the essay that we wrote through ChatGPT. And that's because there's a lot of kind of discrepancy with the detectors, that the better you write, the more likely you are to get flagged as AI, which is one of the reasons that the checkers are so unreliable. And thank you so much, moderator, for leaving this in the chat. This is actually the third part of a 3-part series on improving your MBA application. So check the links in the chat if you guys want to review the first 2 sessions in this series. It helps you with all different parts of your MBA application. So honestly, the better the writer you are, the more likely you are to get flagged. And so admissions committees know this, the schools know this. And if you base an admissions decision on an unreliable tool, that does open you up for potentially a bit of legal action. If you say that you're denying somebody specifically because you believe that they used AI, and then they can prove that they didn't. So they're not necessarily putting it through GPT-0 and saying, 78% chance you used AI, you're done. They may or may not be using those detectors. Most schools are actually honestly okay with you using it as a co-creator, much like you'd use someone like me, an admissions consultant. You're not going to come to me and say, Ellin, write me an essay. And I'm never going to do that for you. But if you say, listen, Ellin, I wrote this essay, I want some help brainstorming it. Where are the areas I can improve, or can you help me work on this phrasing for this introduction and, make it more compelling? Absolutely. It's a partnership. We're co-creating your essay together. I'm helping you make it better. If we think of AI as your, admissions consultant, I think that's a much better kind of place of mind to think about that. And so if we look at what Columbia has said, and this is a pretty kind of standard approach for most of the schools, Columbia Business Schools required that the work in your application is completely accurate and exclusively your own. They permit the use of Gen AI tools for idea generation and to evaluate your work. However, the tools to generate complete responses violates the honor code. So this is really important, because it's not saying if you use AI at all, you are out. It's saying if you use AI in a way that can be taken as plagiarism, as taking somebody else's work and calling it your own, that constitutes an honor code violation, and we can rescind your admissions decision. So this is a really important distinction. It's not that they're going to run it through and be like, oh, if you get below 50% AI score, you're in. If you get above 50% AI score, you're out. No. But if it seems to be plagiarized, or, it seems to be 100% ChatGPT generated, and there's some way that can be proved, which I think would be a little bit difficult, they can take further action. It's not worth the risk, honestly. And also, I think it's problematic because it will cause other issues in your application, which we're going to talk about in a second. One thing that they can spot, and this is, I think if any of you have spent any time on LinkedIn, you can probably spot an AI-generated LinkedIn post from a mile away, because they all kind of sound the same. They all kind of have the same features. And so what we can spot is generic phrasing, lack of specificity, essays that could be about anyone. So the real tell, I think, with AI is not what it gets on a checker, but the emotional flatness, the maybe strategic incoherence in an essay. So here's an example of something that might feel flat. And this was something that I generated with ChatGPT, asking it to answer the question, what makes you feel most alive when doing it, and why, which is Berkeley Haas's essay question. It's the video this year. So they say, I feel most alive when working on challenging projects that require creativity, collaboration, and problem solving. In those moments, I'm able to fully engage my skills while also learning from others, which creates a strong sense of purpose and momentum. I enjoy the process of identifying a problem, analyzing different perspectives, and developing a solution that drives meaningful results. This combination of intellectual stimulation and shared progress makes me feel energized and motivated. Ultimately, I feel alive when I'm growing, contributing, and moving towards goals that have a positive impact beyond myself. It doesn't sound bad, right? Like, it's not terrible writing. It's just a bit generic, right? Like, we're not really like, what is a challenging project that requires creativity or collaboration? It'd be great to see the specific mention of a specific project, or a little bit more emotional detail about why, you fully engage with this, and how it feels to work on these types of projects with other people. And, you feel alive when growing, contributing, and moving towards goals that have a positive impact beyond myself. That is a very generic phrasing. People love to put that in their essays, even when it's not MBA or ChatGPT generated. But that kind of, this could apply to anything, this could apply to anyone. That's a really big tell. And then let's look at an human generated essay for the same question. And this was actually before it was a video. If it was a video now, I would change it a little bit, but this was a couple of years ago. I just really liked this essay. The boat hummed low on the Rio Negro as dawn lifted a thin pink line over the Amazon rainforest canopy. A woman beside me peeled a fruit I could not name, smiled, and offered me a bite. I was half awake, sweaty, and a little nervous. The forest woke up too, with birds cutting through the air and laughter drifting from the shore. In that moment, I felt my world stretch. Travel makes me feel alive because it puts me in places that do not mirror me. Every new city or trail is a gentle collision with someone else's normal, and I leave each one a little less certain of my assumptions and a little more curious about my own. You can then he kind of goes through and says, whether this is, in the Amazon or pulling a piranha from the water, shaking hands with the locals, traveling across different states or being in Paris in a taxi. These moments are not souvenirs. They're mirrors held up from unexpected angles. So we really get to see a lot more detail, a lot more emotional depth. They put us into a scene that this person has lived, that they've experienced. We get to feel what they're feeling. So we really feel like, okay, there's another person on the other side of this essay. I feel like I know them a little bit better reading this. And it's also just a lot more, it's got those tactile details that just make the essay a lot more interesting to read. And not to say that ChatGPT couldn't do something like this, but it would be very difficult and you'd have to know how to prompt it correctly. And we will be talking about prompts later on. And I do have some suggested prompts that will help you guys get better results from AI engines. But in general, it's going to be very difficult just to have a totally ChatGPT generated essay. I always like to use the metaphor that you wouldn't ask someone to paint your portrait without showing them a picture of your face first. So if you just give ChatGPT the instructions to write a compelling essay on blah, 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 you're going to get something really generic. You're going to get a portrait of yourself that doesn't look anything like you. Whereas, if you have a picture of your face and you'd maybe like to clear up your skin a little bit or improve the lighting, and you ask Nano Banana to do that for you, great, you're going to get a great outcome, right? So that's really what we're thinking about. The one thing I do want to suggest is that you never know who's on the other side of the screen and what their personal biases towards AI are. This is actually true not just for AI. This is why we don't mention politics. This is why we don't mention, a lot of specific things in MBA essays, because we never know who's reading it and what biases they bring to the table. But, there are some people that are very pro AI. There are some people who are very anti AI. That is in the admissions committee. I was talking to an admissions committee member the other day, and they said, that really extends to our faculty as well. Some faculty members love AI and they use it in their classroom. Others hate it and they ban it in their classroom. So our school struggles to have a coherent policy on AI use because there's such polarization. So it's important to remember that when writing your essay. And I think for that reason, I'd love to kind of share what some of the AI tells are. So even if you're using AI, you can remove some of these signatures that you use AI, not to be shady, but because, it's, if somebody sees an M dash, they might judge the text based on an M dash, not because it's good or bad, just like, oh my gosh, they used an M dash, it must be AI. Whereas, I look back at essays from 2013, 2014, people using M dashes, and obviously it's not AI generated, but I think it's good to remove these tells. So number one, we all know, is the M dash. I just get rid of it. Most of the time, a comma works perfectly well in place of an M dash. It's not about X, it's about Y formula. It's not about working harder. It's about working smarter. It's not about this, it's about that. It's not this in life, it's this. That kind of duality, that kind of dichotomy context, phrased in that particular way is something that AI loves to do. And I think we're all kind of starting to recognize that as a feature of AI generated content. Again, not to say that people didn't do that before, because AI is trained on how we used to write. But I think this is a tell for sure. So be careful if you use it. AI also has a rule of three obsession. So they like to use alliteration in threes. It was clear, concise, and compelling. There are people that write like that. And again, this is where if you're a very talented writer, you might write like that. But most of us don't use perfect alliteration and perfect pacing and things like that when we're working on an essay. We would say, something was fast and cheap and it kind of works, right? So when we have that perfect rule of three, sometimes that can come across as AI. That's one where I would say, use it to your own, like use your best judgment. And if you have one thing that might be an AI tell in your essay, that's fine. But if you have multiple of these, it might be time to change some things. The Wikipedia voice is something that I also suggest being careful about. I think AI writing a lot of times sound like someone swallowed a textbook and is trying to please everyone. That generic text that we talked about for the Berkeley essay, I think is a perfect example of that. It uses a lot of buzzwords, says all the right things, but just kind of sounds like it's trying to be everything to everyone. And then there's three more. Number one is words like tapestry, landscapes, in today's something world metaphor. They love using these. ChatGPT loves describing things as a rich tapestry or talking about the landscape of innovation or in today's fast-paced world, blah, blah, blah. So these are ones that it uses a lot. If you're using these, maybe try to think about a different way to say it. Again, if you use it once, is that the end of the world? No, but kind of a conjunction of factors can be problematic. Enthusiasm overload, and I mostly see this in letters of recommendation, which if your recommenders are using ChatGPT, there's a lot more forgiveness there because they're using, they're asking the recommender to do a massive favor for everyone. They get nothing out of this. So they know they're busy guys. And if they use ChatGPT to do your letter, there's a lot of grace there, but on your essay, not so much. And so things like powerful solutions, revolutionary approaches, groundbreaking insights, these like really over the top adjectives can be a little bit of a tell. It also just doesn't sound super mature and professional a lot of times. And then also the setup payoff structure. So like a rhetorical question or a bold statement, something like, what is the meaning of life? The answer lies in. And then the explanation is surprisingly generic. That doesn't mean that you can't set up these kind of dualities or dichotomies or, kind of hooks almost in the beginning of your essay. You can just be careful that it doesn't come across as cliche or that the giveaway isn't generic, because I think that's incredibly problematic. So let's get into the 3 deadly sins of AI essay writing. So the first sin that we're going to talk about is using AI, to generate instead of to refine. So out of the box, AI doesn't know your story, your strategy, or what makes you compelling. Again, the portrait. If it doesn't know what you look like, it's not going to give you a portrait that looks like you. If you say, oh, I'm blonde and I have blue eyes, like, okay, it might get close-ish, but it's not going to be my face, right? So asking AI to create something from scratch for you tends to create something generic rather than something powerful. So here's an example that I'll leave on the screen for a little bit if you guys want to read through it. But, in terms of this example, it doesn't have anything specific to the person. So, 2 weeks before our product launch, our enterprise pilot partner threatened to pull out over privacy gaps and a rollout that they felt was too complex, risking a third of projected revenue and team confidence. As a project lead, my task was to steady a stressed cross-functional squad, uncover the real blockers, and save the pilot without derailing the launch. Again, it just kind of is using generic business terms. We're not really setting like what kind of company was it? What were the stakes a little bit more specifically? What did your team look like? So here, things like back inside, I cleared calendars, paired engineering with security to build an encrypted proxy that removed sensitive fields, simplified the workflow from 7 steps to 3, and created a 1-page guide and short training video to make adoption easy for frontline users. Why did you do these things? What steps did you take? Who did you collaborate with? Why did you collaborate with them? What were the challenges that you faced? How did you communicate through those challenges? I think the number one thing about AI essays that's tricky is that on the surface, they look pretty good. Like you could read this and be like, yeah, this sounds pretty good. First of all, it didn't happen probably. And that's a problem because you're lying on your application. But second, it's really, really generic. And we have the problem again, where it's essentially a kind of plagiarized text. So the fix here is use AI to refine your thinking. Never create your thinking. So come to it with a general outline. Even that could be bullet points. Try to give as much detail in those bullet points as you can and ask it to help it piece it together. Or even better, write a first draft of your star story and ask it for feedback. Where is it weak? Where is it strong? Where does the show good fit with Kellogg or the prompt? So it's really important to use it as a second step. And so use it to refine, not generate. Sin number 2 is to accept AI's first draft mentality. AI optimizes for coherence, not necessarily memorability. And it removes the edge that makes you interesting. And this is so important because when the barrier for entry now is so low in terms of an MBA application, I think now the most difficult thing is paying the admissions, like paying the application fee, because there's schools that don't require you to take a GMAT. You could AI generate your essays. Your recommender could AI generate your letters. It's pretty easy to send in a mediocre MBA application as long as you're willing to pay the admissions fee. And so that authenticity is really what becomes people's edge, right? Really feeling like I got to know the person, really feeling that vulnerability on the other side of the screen is really what's going to make me say, oh, this is refreshing. And this feels right. And kind of going back to LinkedIn, if you read a lot of LinkedIn posts and you find one that just feels really raw and human in general, you're like, oh, wow, this feels good. This is nice to read. Finally, somebody who's not just saying, hot take, or this might be a controversial opinion, but, and then listing, things in groups of 3 and committing all those tells that we talked about. So here, you can say, write the first 2 paragraphs of an essay. I did just the first 2 paragraphs for the sake of space for the what matters most essay and why. Choose the topic, but make it personal, raw, and creative. And it's, it's fine. It just lacks those narrative details that are going to make somebody say, I know this person. I see what makes them tick. I feel their vulnerability coming through the page. So, what matters is learning most to me to stay when every instinct says to run, not the dramatic kind of running people applaud, like quitting a job or changing cities, but the quieter version that happens inside your chest. The moment a room feels too small for your truth, the moment someone you love disappoints you, the moment a version of success you worked for starts to taste like someone else's dream. For most of my life, I treated that feeling like a fire alarm. I got good at exiting before anyone could see me flinch. So you can see, it's not terrible, to be honest. It's not bad. I've read much worse essays generated by real humans than this. But I don't have any details. Why do what instinct says to run specifically, and why, what kind of experiences shaped you into that person? Who are the people that you talked to, or the things that you lived through that made you realize that this was something important? Also, the topic's a little weird for business school, right? It's a little odd. It doesn't really make sense in terms of how would you connect this to your career goals? And this maybe feels a little bit more like therapy than a good MBA admissions essay. So again, this is I think where it's just trying to be coherent. It's just trying to be dramatic, and it fits the bill. It really does what I asked it to do, but it's not memorable for the right reasons. It doesn't include those details that make a human being something unique. So here is an example of somebody who she wrote this pre-AI, and she wrote her what matters most about comic books. And she talked about, that nothing has marked her more than comic books, and how she read them. Superheroes became popular by serving their community. They all also had some sort of defining moment, and a shared story of social exclusion. Spider-Man's a nerd, Herc is a cursed monster, Batman is an orphan, Superman is an alien expatriate. And what made her love those stories was not their powers, but how they empowered their pain. And so then she goes through and talks a little bit about her family, growing up in an unequal country. And she kind of gives a lot of introduction here. And I didn't want to share the rest of the essay because it's a bit more personal, but talking about how she always felt like the outsider and how she went through her own via crucis, and how that turned her into the person that she is today. And so those kind of details, especially then connecting it with her own background and her own family members and experiences from her CV that we can kind of cross-reference, make that a much more powerful essay. And then the biggest one, and I think this is the hardest one to fall into, is letting AI make the strategic decisions without critical thinking. So ChatGPT does not know how to position you within a competitive applicant pool. It can give you some advice, but honestly, the advice that it gives you will be a little bit different every time. It can't tell you what stories are best to use, and it generally kind of reinforces what it thinks that your biases are, unless you're really careful with prompting. And the secret here is twofold. You need to have strong prompts, and you need to use AI as a co-creator and a thought partner. So I have created a platform, My Admit Coach, which the moderator will drop in a link in the description. And what we've really focused on doing is creating an AI agent that's based on MBA applications. So ChatGPT just takes everything from the internet. What we've done is we've connected it to more than 10 million words of MBA admissions data, successful essays, successful CVs, my writing and thought process that's led to our success rate, to really be able to help it tailor in what each school is looking for and what an admissions committee would think. And so that's the difference, I think, between kind of a generic solution and one that's a lot more specialized towards you. But even still, it all comes down to prompting, right? And critical thinking. AI hallucinates. Maybe at some point in the future it won't, but the reality that we live in today is that it still hallucinates. So you need to have critical thinking and be critical of the outputs that it provides you. And sometimes that can mean asking a human for some feedback, or just sitting and saying, I've been to a bunch of MBA admissions events, and does this really make sense? I don't think so. So it's really important to take that extra moment and really think through the results that you get. So what happens is, I think a lot of people too have really bad prompts. When creating My Admit Coach, I spent a lot of time working with prompt engineers to develop excellent prompts that are going to really help you be much more successful. So here's a prompt, for example, to help you, what we call the story blocks exercise. So help you map out and choose your best stories. And this is just a fraction of it. It's a seven point prompt. But you can see that it asks you for your goals, your personal brand, your story block exercises, which you fill out as a human on your own, thinking on your own in your own way. And then it asks you, ask based on these to provide feedback. Again, this is connected with admissions experience. This is connected with admissions data in a way that ChatGPT is not quite there yet. So, by having these kinds of power prompts that really, and thinking very critically about not just saying, which of my stories are best for Harvard, going into a lot more detail is going to get you a lot better results. So you need to really think about how to prompt well. And when it comes to essays and things like that, I'm going to give you guys a couple of bonus prompts that you can use, but just to kind of show you the complexity of prompting. And also a lot of times the first prompt, if you're using simpler prompts, is not going to get you what you need. You need to keep prompting to get good results. And then, of course, always look at what you got. Think about what you got. Don't just copy, paste, submit. So let's talk a little bit about the right way to use AI. We've talked a bit about some of the setbacks, but AI is a great tool, super powerful, helps us do a better job than we can do on our own. So let's talk about the right way to use AI. So the number one stage that we want to think about is, let's think about strategy first. Let's brainstorm in an AI-free zone. Develop your personal brand, your goal statement, your positioning. Map out what each essay needs to accomplish. So, okay, with Harvard, I've gone through the Harvard Brainstorm. I've thought about different stories. I've thought about different ways that I need to present myself, and identify what your specific memorable details are and include those in your brainstorming documents. And then use AI for validation, checking weak spots, improvements, maybe help you select your best stories. I've got 3 leadership stories, and, I'm applying to INSEAD. Which one should I use? Obviously, that's a bit of a weak prompt. It could improve, but things like that can be good questions. So, here's an example of part of the prompt that we use in the app for personal brand. So analyzing, responses and providing a brand assessment, thinking about what's your golden thread, thinking about your brand pillars, your unique differentiators, your narrative coherence, your profile strength. So AI can really give us fantastic feedback on what we've already done, but we can't just say, here's my CV, what should be my personal brand? It's really helpful to do that extra level of thinking before you get to that point. Also, we want to use AI as a writing partner. I think, again, just like you would maybe hire an admissions consultant to help you work on your MBA essays, improve them, AI does a great job with that. So AI is a great way to help us test different ways of structuring the same content really quickly, really fast. We can iterate 30 times in the space of a couple minutes, whereas with an admissions consultant, doing that would take months. So it really helps us iterate quickly and find different ways to be creative. We can use it as a theme brainstorming partner. A lot of the best essays have a really clear theme. Maybe it's ballet. If you were in our last session, we talked about an essay that used ballet as a great metaphor. Maybe it's about travel. Maybe it's about, growing up with a stutter or your passion for flag design or something like that. There are a lot of different themes that can be very interesting. And AI can be a great thought partner to help you brainstorm what those themes could be, and then also help you figure out how to integrate them and figure out maybe where your theme is lacking. And then also it can be great on giving you feedback about how it fits with prompt and narrative clarity. So, how well does my essay fit the prompt, essentially? Or how well does this answer fit Kellogg's values, for example? So here's an example prompt that helps you improve intros and conclusions. If you guys want, you can watch the replay, pause it, copy and paste it, or sign up for the platform. We have an intro deal going on right now. And use this to improve your writing, right? And this, I think, is a really responsible use of AI. I'm maybe not the best writer of introductions or conclusions to my essays, and AI can help me. Or maybe I've thought about it, and I can't come up with a good idea. Thinking through it with AI can help me brainstorm some great ideas. And then also we can use AI as a great editor. Great for grammar and clarity checks. I really recommend Grammarly. If you don't already, you can install Grammarly on your browser and it will check everything within your browser, which I think is especially nice when you're looking at the application forms and they say, what are your key accomplishments, your reason for leaving, all those little text boxes. It's really easy to make a mistake there. And that having that checker within within your browser can be super helpful. But I mean, getting, feedback on grammar, clarity, typos, things like that can be really helpful. Also getting, feedback on grammar, sentence variation, and flow. It can also help you cut wordiness, especially for really small essays. That can be really helpful. One thing I'd like to share there is to use a percentage in the prompt because AI thinks in tokens, not words. It's not very good yet at reducing by a specific number of words or hitting a specific word count. So if you say, reduce my essay to 500 words, most of the time you're going to get 539 or 518 or 400. You're not going to really get there so easily. So it's easier to train it to think in percentages. So if your essay is 550 words, and you need to get to 500, say, please reduce my essay by 10%. You're going to get a lot closer. Again, it's probably not going to be perfect. You're going to have to go through and double check it, but you're going to get a lot closer to where you need to be. And here's an example of a prompt as well to help you correct your essays. And you have a couple of different things that you can improve my writing, correct any errors, do not use any dashes, leave my writing as intact as possible. That's also something that I like to prompt the system to do, because if you don't ask it to leave your writing as intact as possible, a lot of times it'll just change everything. And that's fine, but you don't necessarily want AI to flatten your voice, right? You want it to help enhance your voice. So asking it to leave it as intact as possible is really helpful. I also like to ask it to bold all the changes that you make, because there is nothing more annoying than comparing two versions back and forth, especially if it's, 600 word essay. So I like to be able to quickly and easily see where it's made the changes and decide if I like them or not. And some of the times I accept it, some of the times I don't. The errors, like correcting the errors, is nice to see. And I usually run it through Grammarly as well. But I love the improve my writing, and you can be as specific as possible there. So improve my writing to make the storytelling flow better, or improve my writing to demonstrate better fit with the prompt, or improve my writing to make sure that my theme flows more carefully throughout. And so you can go through multiple iterations. Again, this is where AI is great in a way that me as an admissions consultant, as a human, can't help you as quickly, right? You can do one iteration on theme. You can do one iteration then to improve your conclusion. You can do one iteration to improve your transition statements. You can do one iteration to think about how well it's fitting the prompt. So, I like to go through multiple iterations rather than have it do 10 different things in one specific prompt. But usually you get great outcomes as a result. So one thing that's non-negotiable is your final pass. Before you click submit, before you upload in the platform, read your essay out loud. It's especially like with our brains being so addled from social media, reading it out loud is really helpful because it slows us down and we pay a little bit more attention to it. And it should sound like you. And you should ask yourself, would somebody who knows me recognize my voice? And if you're not sure, ask them like, hey, mom, does this sound like me? Or hey, husband, wife, does this sound like me? And then think, are there specific details that only you could write? Things like, eating the fruits, or, sailing, like navigating the Rio Negro River. It's really important to have those kind of unique details, because authenticity is the new edge. It's easier than ever to write an admissions essay. It's harder than ever to stand out. So in that flood of like AI generated slop, like that human edge, that authenticity really gives you an advantage over your competitors. So our key question really, when we think about AI, that I'd love to leave you guys with is, who's doing the hard thinking? And almost everyone has access to the same AI tools. There are some that are more designed towards AI admissions or towards MBA admissions, like my admit coach, like I mentioned. But I mean, if everyone's using ChatGPT, you're going to get pretty similar outputs, right? So the differentiator is still you, your strategy, your stories, your voice. AI is a tool, not a shortcut to bypass the hard thinking. And one thing I'd love to leave you guys with before we move to question and answer today is that the MBA, if you let it be, can be an amazing process of self-reflection and self-discovery. But making it that means that you have to give yourself the time and the depth to go through that. So thinking through what your goals are and why and where you want to be in 10 years and the impact that you want to make, that can be a really clarifying experience to help you say, wow, I'm not on the right path in life and I want to get on the right path. Thinking about your personal brand can be a really helpful exercise to go back and say, I've done a lot of really amazing things. I'm actually a lot more accomplished than I thought I was. And going through the process of writing essays and drafting essays can really help clarify your values and what you've done and what's important to you. But if you let AI do all the thinking for you, you miss out on that. So I really do. I have people that come to me all the time asking me to walk them through the AI or the MBA application process as a coaching process, because their sister applied for the MBA and they want to do the same process but not go to an MBA. So there is a lot of value in that if you let there be. So always think about, you should be doing the hard thinking and AI should be helping you improve, just like you would with an admissions consultant. So let's get to the Q&A. I'm going to be pulling some questions from the chat. If you guys would like some profile evaluations, there is a pin link. You can get in contact with us directly through our site. Let's see. We have a question from Pooja. When I asked Duke whether I could use AI, they said that they permitted me to do so. Could you please shed more light on it? Yeah, so I think they are probably not going to tell you exactly how to use AI, just like they're not going to tell you exactly how to use your essay or to write your essays in general, just because it's a very personal process. It's a very personal decision. But I would say that they probably mean to use it in a way that's not considered plagiarism. So using it as a tool to refine, to edit, to improve, I think is perfectly acceptable. But using it to generate is almost always out. I mean, I'm not gonna say almost, is always out. It's just copying someone else's work, which has all the disadvantages that we've already talked about. But yeah, generally I would say that they would let you use it as a co-creator, as a tool for improvement, just like you would use an admissions committee. Let's see, Shia, I'm not sure how to say, 97, I created my essay, but I don't know how it is. You can get in touch with us through our site. We'd be happy to help you work through, the essay editing process, or you can use our tool. Also really helpful to help you edit and improve your essays. I think that the best thing to understand how good your essay is to get feedback. But I would be careful with who you get feedback from. Sometimes we ask too many people, and I think that can be problematic. If you ask 20 people about whether or not your essay is good or not, they're all going to have different opinions. They're all going to like something different. They're all going to hate something different. If you take everybody's opinion, you're not going to have a good essay at the end. So definitely get some feedback, but choose well. An admissions consultant, an alum, a person that you trust, a mentor, the kind of right AI tools to get feedback, I think is really helpful to know if you've done a good job or not. Akash has said, how much does an essay hold weight for the AdCom in the selection process? Yeah, I mean, it's what they always say, it's a holistic process, right? And it is. They're looking at a lot of different things within your application. Your GMAT and your GPA are very important. Your career progression is very important. I would say that, if you don't have good statistics, a killer essay is going to be really, really difficult to overcome that. It could, if there's a reason in life that you haven't done super well and your essay explains that, that could maybe close the gap. But I would say that once you have the strong stats, the MBA essay becomes even, or the admissions essay becomes even more important, right? That's what helps you stand out. That's what helps you show your motivations, lay everything out, show what makes you a unique contributor to the class. So I would say probably about 20% of your total decision would come down to your essays. That, we could debate that back and forth. Maybe it's 15, maybe it's 25, maybe it's 30, but I would say about 20% is a good kind of average. But I would think of it more as like the profile stats are kind of a triage. And then once you get past that first level, the MBA admissions essay really helps kind of split the really interesting people from the people who just have good stats but didn't tell their story very effectively. Any point using AI for MIM essays? Sure, for sure. I mean, anywhere that it can help you for writing tasks in general, I think. Again, just be careful that you are using AI with the best practices. But yeah, absolutely. I think I would use it in the exact same way for MIM. I have clients that I work with for LLM, Masters in Business Analytics. I just worked with someone who did a master's in jewelry design and fashion. We use AI I encourage them if they want to use AI in a similar way. Use it as a co-creator, use it to help you brainstorm, make the process, more painless for you. So yeah, definitely. If you upload a draft of the essay for refinement, won't it appear AI generated after incorporating the AI input? I mean, it depends on how much you use. Like, if you're going to just say like, oh, hey, ChatGPT, rewrite my essay for me. Like, yeah, it's probably going to show up as AI generated. Again, if you use it just for incremental improvements, I mean, probably not to any meaningful extent. Like, even human generated essays 100% show up as AI generated to an extent. So again, the tools are inconsistent. They're not really effective. They may get to the point where they are, and then we can have a different conversation about it. But at the moment, they're not super reliable. So, I mean, if your essay is showing up as 100% AI generated, and it's 100% AI generated, you might want to revisit things. But, if you're helping it, having it help you, reword a little bit or cut words, that shouldn't really make a big difference. Ask it again in the prompt, keep my writing as intact as possible. If you're asking it to help you with a couple conclusions or the conclusion statement or a transition here or there, it shouldn't cause any kind of meaningful spike. But again, go back and look at those tells because those are also going to kind of spike the checkers. Great. Well, thank you guys. I have so much. We probably have time for one more question if anybody has any burning questions that they'd like to ask. But I would say, the most important thing about using AI is use it as a tool, not as a crutch. Just as you wouldn't ask an admissions consultant to write your essay for you, don't ask AI tools to write essays for you. And again, if you want to go back, it's on the screen right now. We have some other sessions on different types of essays and how you can write those. So definitely go back and check the other videos in the series. And yeah, it's been a pleasure having all of you guys on the chat, in the chat and on the session today. Thank you so much for your attention. Good luck in your applications, and hopefully you have a very successful admission cycle.